Hi everyone, and happy Earth Day. I'm James Herrera, the Program Coordinator of the Duke Lemur Center SAVA Conservation Initiative, and I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about our projects conserving lemur habitats in the wild in Madagascar. I'd like to start by acknowledging our team in Madagascar. First, my partner Laura Diata, who is the Duke Lemur Center liaison in Madagascar. She brings her passion and expertise in environmental education as well as community outreach to help us in our mission to get the message out in Madagascar. Lantu Anjiananjasana is our project coordinator. He's been with the program since 2011. Charlie Welsh is the conservation coordinator at DLC. And our staff on the ground also includes several local community members, including Rabe Manansua Torien and Banevson Evra. So if you've been tuning with us throughout the day, you've heard about what a special place Madagascar is. It's the fourth largest island in the world. It's about the size of Texas. It just kind of looks small there next to Southeast Africa. And with that huge size, it's got a variety of different habitats, including the rainforests, the dry tropical deciduous forests, even spiny desert. And perhaps the most famous are the lemurs of Madagascar. They're charismatic, diverse. There's about 100 different species. And they also play really important roles in their ecosystems. They're seed dispersers, they're prey for predators, and even sometimes predators themselves. So they're really important in the ecosystem, but they're threatened mostly due to habitat loss. So in Madagascar, like many tropical countries, habitat loss is a big problem. Almost 50% of the forest in Madagascar has been lost since 1950. And that's about equivalent to over 1 million football fields worth of forest. In this graph, you can see that in orange, it's color-coded by the source of the deforestation, or the cause. And the orange, in this case, is shifting agriculture, or slash and burn. The project is called SAVA Conservation because we work in the northeast, the SAVA region, which is highlighted here in red. And starting in the 1950s, we have access to aerial photographs. So you can see the land cover and the forest cover in 1950 and compare that to when we started to have satellite images in 1970. Compare that to today, and we can see how the forest has really contracted. About 20% of the forest has vanished within the last 18 years. What does this look like on the ground? Well, as I mentioned, slash and burn agriculture is the predominant cause of forest loss, and this is where farmers will cut a parcel of forest, allow that vegetation to dry, and then burn it. And by burning it, it releases this ash, which provides a flush of nutrients with which the farmers can grow their staple crops, which include rice, as well as corn, cassava, and beans. And this kind of agriculture leads to this mosaic landscape where you can see areas that are recently burned, areas that are in fallow, small patches of forest, and then where you see this tree line on the mountaintop, that's the boundary of the national park. So you can see that without those national parks, a lot of these hillsides become completely denuded. And this isn't just about preserving lemur habitat. This is about preserving the ecosystem services that these forests provide for people for free, including clean air, clean water, stabilizing the soil and preventing erosion. And these days, we're especially concerned about carbon sequestration. So at the Duke Lemur Center SAVA Conservation, we take a very community-based approach to conservation. We work closely with communities at the forest frontier. We meet them in their villages to hear about the challenges they're facing and the solutions they envision for their futures. We meet with them in focus groups in the villages and in the farms so that we can hear from a diverse set of voices. But we also do one-on-one interviews with farmers so that we can understand in-depth information about what's causing the issues that they face. We partner with a lot of local entities, especially the university in the area, which is called CURSA. And by working so closely with these communities, we can make a very place-based and appropriate, culturally appropriate conservation program rather than kind of a generalized formula for how conservation should be done. So one of our big projects is in agroforestry. This is planting trees within the agricultural landscape, and it comes in many different forms. One of the initiatives that we've had is partnering with the local governance and the university to establish and maintain tree nurseries in the area. These tree nurseries are supporting tens of thousands of native seedlings, and the goal is to plant these trees out in the landscape and restore those degraded areas. By volunteering with the local university, 100 students came out, and in one day were able to help bring in the soil and compost needed to fill more than 3,000 pots for future seedlings. We partner with a lot of different local community nurseries to help them to meet their goals by providing supplies as well as technical support. And so, for example, in one project, which is a beach restoration at a coastal community, we partnered with a German research consortium to provide over 1,500 seedlings. These seedlings were planted out on the beach as part of a beach restoration program. The local communities here want to create a windbreak and storm surge protection because these beaches are highly vulnerable to storms like cyclones or hurricanes. We also work with farming cooperatives, schools, and even local PTAs to create nurseries where the students, teachers, and parents help to take care of cash crops that are mixed with native trees. These cash crops include things like coffee trees, chocolate, cloves, and vanilla. And so far, just this year, over 2,000 seedlings have been produced in this nursery, and 200 have been distributed to farmers that they can plant in their fields. And this creates an economic incentive to having these trees on the landscape. This program fits very well with the large national scale program, which the president of Madagascar has an ambitious commitment to plant 60 million trees on hundreds of thousands of acres. The motto, Madagascar Kudrakucha ala Nutanzana. The goal is to cover Madagascar in forest. Just in January, thousands of volunteers planted 1 million trees in an area about the size of Central Park, just outside of the capital city. And the same is going on in all the different districts. In the SAVA region, tens of thousands of trees were planted in one day. So we at DLC are committed to helping the SAVA community meet their goals of covering Madagascar in forest. The rise of organic agriculture has led to many spin-offs, and one of them that's really become predominant is called regenerative agriculture. This subfield recognizes the biodynamics of agroecosystems, especially in terms of soil health. So we led a month-long training workshop in regenerative soil health with farmers as well as students. Here, the participants from one of the village pose in front of their newly created home garden. And we worked with a collaborating organization called Terra Firma International, led by Peter Jensen, who has done these trainings for over 30 years in different parts of Africa, and we recruited him to bring that expertise to Madagascar. With over 50 participants, we developed skills in climate-smart methods like managing stormwater runoff, composting, and polyculture. Here, the farmers and university students show that they are not afraid to get their hands dirty in agroecology. Lily is showing off how they're amending the topsoil with locally available materials like ash and char from the cooking fire, eggshells from the kitchen, and even nitrogen-rich leaves that they collect from the live fences. This is also an opportunity for school children and local community members to observe and see a whole new take on traditional farming methods. This training ensured that 50% of the participants were women, and we are truly engaging with the worldwide goals of increasing equity, and in our farming projects we see this as an excellent opportunity. Women are critical to the agricultural value chain, and yet they often receive many fewer opportunities in that value chain. So by empowering women, not only from the local villages as well as the universities, this is going to create more impetus for sustainable development. And the results we've seen so far are just amazing. Within weeks, we've seen these beds just popping with life. Diverse beans, lemongrass, tomatoes, and we're really focusing on nutrient-dense foods to meet these problems of malnutrition in the communities. I just want to highlight one of our participants because he's really just highlighted how much the people are engaging with these skills that we taught. This is Jeannot, and in December he created these raised beds amended with locally available materials, covered in mulch, and planted with a polyculture of companion plants. In February, it was flourishing with corn, peanuts, cassava, squash, and even rice grown without slash and burn and without flooding the fields. So 50% of the participants in the workshops have already created their own home gardens, and we are continuing with our program to evaluate and consult with these farmers as they progress. So often in this time of increasing environmental degradation, people feel the desire to help, but we just don't know how, especially when it can be so far over there in Madagascar. Well, what can we do here? One of the first things is to remember that the Western and high-income countries tend to have a disproportionately large footprint on the global ecology. So this is a map showing the ecological footprint where darker shades of purple indicate a larger consumption of natural resources than you would expect given the area. And so we, as the high-income countries, need to recognize our influence on the rest of the world. For example, many precious woods and important minerals come from places like Madagascar. Electronics have metals like mica, much of it coming from questionable sources in Madagascar, and coltan from the Congo. Try to find out where your smartphones and laptops and other electronics get their materials before you buy. Buy ethically sourced products like Fair Trade or Rainforest Alliance certified products. Try to avoid things that have palm oil, and in the case of Madagascar, buy all natural Fair Trade Madagascar vanilla. 80% of the world's vanilla comes from the SAVA region of Madagascar, and it's a huge part of the local as well as national economy. In fact, $800 million worth of exports are coming into Madagascar just from vanilla. So it really helps the country as well as the local farmers. And I also want to take this time to point out that all the activities that I've talked about are funded by grants and donations from viewers like you. We thank you for your generosity, and your donations make all these projects possible. So if you check out the lemur.duke.edu website, you can find ways to contribute. You can also volunteer with us, either in the US at Durham, in Madagascar, or even remotely. Contact us to find out how. I'd like to thank our sponsors that have made this work possible, and just close by telling you our motto, Miato Atiala Mambuli Fiainana, to protect the forest and life will grow. So with that, I would just like to wrap up by addressing the few questions that I've gotten recently when I've given these presentations and talked to about our projects. A question that I got recently that really resonated with me was this: how do local communities feel about you foreigners coming in and telling them how to farm? I interpret this as, how does the DLC frame our activities in a culturally mindful and ethical way? Well, first, we're working very closely with the local communities. They tell us about their challenges, the problems that they see, including decreasing agricultural yields, food insecurity, that the plants just don't produce crops like they used to. They also link these to changes in their environment and the loss of forest cover. They see their water sources drying up. They feel the extreme heat. They see the erosion and flooding that's happening. And they know that it's harder and harder to find fuel wood and timber for construction. So all these factors tell us that it's a challenge that they perceive. And so we're trying to help them address those challenges. We're developing skills in organic agriculture, and that empowers the farmers to decrease the need for external inputs, especially chemical inputs that are becoming much more common. During one focus group with the participants, one of the participants told me that they would categorize this kind of farming as vulinjazana, or the way of farming of our ancestors. And because we're only using local materials, natural materials, they feel a lot more confident about it because they're worried about the chemicals that are becoming common. A lot of these chemicals have already been banned in the US and the EU because they're harmful to human health, and yet they're widely available in Madagascar. So addressing these issues within the context of the concerns of the local stakeholders is one way that we take a place-based approach. We try to learn as much as we can about the traditional ecological knowledge. The folks here have an intimate knowledge of the seasons, the kinds of plants that they have around them that they can use in their agriculture. And so it's really an educational step for us as well to learn from the local communities. Another question I've gotten frequently is from a lot of young aspiring scientists, and they want to know what's the best career path to go down for lemur conservation. And I have to answer that it really depends. I took an academic route because the peers that I had, the idols and models that I looked after, that's the route they went. They do the academic research, they get a Ph.D., and through that the doors open for conservation. But as I've gone through this process, I've seen that there are a lot of different paths that can lead to conservation, and it's really important to engage with multiple disciplines and stakeholders. As disparate as they may seem, they have large roles to play in an interconnected future of conservation. So environmental economics, public health, agriculture, education are just a few ways in which these different disciplines need to come together for conservation.